So I think we'll keep moving just for the sake of time and maybe have time for questions at the end. The next speaker is from OHSU. It is my pleasure to introduce Tracy Severson. She is a dietitian and an expert on diet and not just congenital heart disease, but cardiac disease in general. Tracy and I sit in the same workroom in clinic, and I can tell you if I ate what she ate for lunch, I would live forever. No joke. So she's really an expert in this area.
Thank you. Okay, great. All right, well, thank you so much for having me speak today. Today I'll be talking about various fad diets that our patients will ask us about, or our neighbors or coworkers will ask us about or try, and the implications for ACHD patients, and also some strategies to make evidence-based good nutrition recommendations that are going to help the health of our patients. Because as we all know, there are many issues that arise in our congenital heart disease patients that have nutrition implications. They're either going to require specialized diets, they're going to have to modify their diet in some way. Healthy nutrition is going to help manage their symptoms. Healthy weight management is going to help reduce symptoms, especially with AFib. So nutrition is a real issue for a lot of our patients. And as we're seeing more and more patients live longer and into adulthood, we're seeing overweight and obesity rates that are equivalent to the general population. So this is bringing on increased rates of diabetes and CAD. So we really need to talk to our patients when they're young about what they're eating, about eating a healthy diet, about healthy weight management, so that we are preventing some of the weight gain that we're seeing later in life. So the diets that we'll be talking about are the popular ones this week. I could certainly have come up with dozens of other ones. A year from now, there will be dozens of new ones. So I'm sure that there are some of that you're wondering about that I'm not talking about today. I'm happy to talk about that afterwards. But there are many, many fad diets, and there always will be, unfortunately, which is job security for me, I suppose. So first up, I'll talk about gluten-free diets. So gluten-free diets are certainly nothing new. We all are familiar with a gluten-free diet, which is required for people with celiac disease. And it is simply the elimination of gluten-containing grains, which are wheat, barley, and rye. Oats are naturally gluten-free, but they're cross-contaminated unless they're in a gluten-free facility. So I'll be focusing mostly on AFib and gluten-free diet. So if you Google diet for AFib, eliminating gluten often comes up in the recommendations. And so I kind of traced it back to the website for the author of Wheat Belly. And if you don't know what Wheat Belly is, it is a New York Times bestseller book written by a cardiologist about the benefits of a gluten-free diet. And on his website, he talks about how he has seen a gluten-free diet improve the symptoms of AFib dozens of times. He doesn't really go beyond that to explain why or the mechanism or any science to support that, but he has witnessed it. And so that's where I think a lot of these claims about AFib and gluten-free have originated. And there is actually an increased risk, slight increased risk, of AFib with patients with celiac disease. They don't know why, if it's something related to chronic inflammation or some shared risk factors, or perhaps that people who are recently diagnosed with celiac disease are going to the doctor more often, and so it's maybe just diagnosed more frequently. But patients without celiac disease, there's no evidence that shows that they're going to have improvement in symptoms or any sort of benefit by eliminating gluten or by eating gluten. It should not have any impact on their AFib. So if patients ask about this, if they have atrial fibrillation, whether or not they eat gluten really is not going to make much of a difference. It's a low-risk diet to try out, though. The problem is gluten-free products are oftentimes more expensive. There's the risk of nutrient deficiencies if they're eliminating whole grains or enriched grains. Then they may lose some fiber or some B vitamins or iron. But overall, it's certainly fine if people try it. Not very necessary, though. All right, next up is the one that everyone's wondering about, the ketogenic diet. So everyone is on the ketogenic diet. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I assume there's someone in the room on it. So this is a low-carb, high-fat diet. Typically, the fat is 80% of calories coming from fat. That's tough to do. You have to try really hard to get your fat intake up that high. The carbohydrate intake is less than 50 grams a day, depending on where the calorie goals are, but definitely less than and often well under 50 grams. The protein intake is moderate, so this is not an Atkins-style high-protein diet. That's moderate, standard protein that we would all normally be eating. And a lot of times, almost all the time. When I have patients come in who say that they're on a ketogenic diet, it is almost never a ketogenic diet when we really get into the nuts and bolts of what they're eating. The protein intake is almost always too high. Often the carbohydrates are almost too high also. But still, it's important to know what this is, and so what the problems may arise with it. And the idea is that as you eliminate carbohydrates from the diet, the body switches over to using fat as its primary fuel source. This increases production of acetyl-CoA, which leads to the formation of ketone bodies. It takes about a week to get there. They have some flu-like symptoms called the keto flu while it's happening. But it has use. So it was developed initially for use with epileptic patients for seizure control. We still use it for seizure control in a lot of patients with epilepsy. OHSU has a ketogenic dietitian, which I always laugh thinking if the public knew that, they would be just clamoring to meet with this dietitian. She's not that kind of dietitian, though. It's only in the epilepsy clinic. But it's used a lot for weight loss, potentially maybe some other uses. So what is the evidence for weight loss and the ketogenic diet? Not much. There are quite a few systematic reviews and meta-analysis for a low-carb, high-fat diet, but most of them are not ketogenic. They use greater than 30% of calories from fat, and so that is usually not fully keto unless it's a much higher fat content. And when you look at a low-carb, high-fat diet and compared to a low-fat diet, over a period of about 2 years, the weight loss is about the same for both. So the idea there is whatever diet someone can stick with long-term is going to work. Not dramatically usually, but they will work. One is not necessarily better than the other when you get out past a year. They're all about the same. There was a meta-analysis of 13 RCTs that was a true keto diet compared to a low-fat diet, and the follow-up was between 12 and 24 months, and that did show a slight increase in weight loss with a keto diet, but about 2 pounds after 2 years. So you're not going to get dramatic results with a keto diet for weight loss based on what we know. The long-term effects, we don't know. We don't know what the long-term implications of someone following this are going to be because the studies have only lasted 2 years. We can assume with all of that saturated fat, it's not doing great things to the heart. And in almost all of these studies, at the end of them, people are not on a true keto diet. In the one meta-analysis that was a true keto, only one of those studies had patients eating under 50 grams of carbs a day by the end of it. So this is just a really tough diet for people to follow. People think it sounds like fun to eat a lot of fat all the day, but when you put it into practice, it's kind of gross. For my patients who they are pretty insistent that they're going to do this image shows you the types of fats that they should be eating. If they're going to do this, then I steer them towards a lot of fish, nuts, seeds, avocados, olive oil. Those are the types of fats that they should be having. It's still going to be too high in saturated fat. Any type of fat has some saturated fat, and if that's all you're eating, it's still going to raise your LDL levels, which is the main primary risk that I see. I work in preventive cardiology with patients with lipid disorders. I've had patients with familial hypercholesterolemia. One in particular came in on a statin with LDL of 100. He started the keto diet. His LDL went to 400, still on the statin. So obviously that's a rare case, but we do expect to see LDLs increase. The fiber intake goes way down when you cut out carbohydrate foods. Constipation is a common side effect, keto flu while they're transitioning into ketosis. And it's a short-term diet. I'm not too concerned with what anyone does short-term. I want to know what someone is eating day to day over years. That's what we see as far as impacting their health long-term. So as far as implications for our patients with congenital heart disease, nothing specific. But it really is not a healthy diet to follow long-term. We really want to focus on making long-term healthy changes in their diet. And with any of these diets, there's always a positive. No one ever starts a diet just to frustrate us. They always do it with the intention of improving some aspect of their health. And I think that's really important to remember as we're seeing our patients and they're asking about these diets. There's always a positive thing. Either they're trying to improve their diet, they're trying to lose weight, they're cutting out processed foods when they're on this diet, so that's something you can tell them is really great about it, and then you can gently redirect them towards some healthier strategies instead, but always find something positive. So this is just an example. In order to get the fat intake up high enough, they have to make these fat bombs. So oftentimes they're made with coconut oil. This one is mayonnaise, butter, bacon, and eggs, which sounds delightful. And it's 600 milligrams of sodium, and there's one little nugget. So, you know, the high sodium intake in a lot of these foods, because patients aren't doing fish and olive oil, they're having a lot of bacon and not so healthy foods. So super high saturated fat, this one's super high in sodium, doesn't look that appetizing to me, maybe to some of you. But. All right, next up is celery juice. And if you haven't heard of celery juice or this craze, that tells me that you are not following Gwyneth Paltrow's website and you're not on Instagram, which are probably both good ideas. But this is really a popular trend. Instagram has all of these famous people and influencers with their big cup of green juice that they drink every morning. So what is this? It is quite literally drinking celery juice every day, but it's very specific. This is quintessential fad diet. 16 to 32 ounces of celery juice has to be freshly made. Nothing can be added to it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. That's taking 1 to 2 large bunches of celery and juicing. It's not blended, it's juiced, so all the fiber is removed. And this originated by someone named Anthony William, who calls himself the medical medium. No scientific training, and I'm not kidding, this is a popular thing. This is not me scrambling to find something obscure. This is a really popular thing. You will hear about this, it's growing. No medical training or scientific training, but he is a medium, so he communicates with spirits who give him medical advice and insight. And so his claim is that celery, which we all know is a big source of sodium, the type of sodium is a sodium cluster salt that traditional science has not yet discovered, and that has a lot of health benefits. I'm not making this up. You should go to his website. It's eye-opening. This is what our patients are reading, too, so it's important to know what's going on. So he says that it breaks down cell membranes, it kills pathogens, it improves digestion by rebuilding hydrochloric acid and increasing bile. Did you know that we even needed to do that? And it reverses inflammation. And again, another marker of a fad diet is the claim that it will cure anything. It has all kinds of benefits, and any kind of condition he claims that it will improve. So, the evidence here. Whole celery is not the most nutrient-dense vegetable out there, but it does have some benefits, one of them being fiber. When you juice it, you do remove the fiber, so maybe some anti-inflammatory benefits from the phytonutrients. But there's no research on just drinking celery juice or to support any of these claims that are being made. No major risks with drinking a cup of celery juice. It's not tons of calories, but diarrhea is a really common side effect. He says that just shows that it's working, and as your body heals, then that will resolve. So keep drinking it, power through. It's almost 500 milligrams of sodium per cup, and sometimes people will, or per 16 ounces, and sometimes people will have double that. So if they're on a fluid restriction with heart failure, if they're on a sodium restriction, they're knocking out half their day's fluid and sodium with this, and they haven't even eaten any food yet. If you buy it at a juice stand, then oftentimes they'll have fruit juice mixed in with it, and that will add a lot of sugar and calories. So not super expensive, not a big deal, but definitely not something that's adding to their health or going to improve any of their heart issues. Intermittent fasting is the last big diet that I'll talk about, and this is another one that probably you have heard about and you've wondered about. People will often do this in conjunction with another diet, so people will do keto with intermittent fasting, because this doesn't really talk about the types of foods that someone is eating, it just talks about the timing around it. So it's just the manipulation of the timing of eating occasions, working in short-term fasts. There are different ways of going about it. Time-restricted feeding is one, so you limit your food intake to 8 hours a day or less. And then there's alternate day fasting. The 5-2 plan is a really popular one. So 2 days a week you fast, and they define fasting as 500 calories or less a day. And the other 5 days you eat whatever you want, just like normal. Fasting is a kind of a loose term. It can be totally not eating, or it can be just eating significantly less than what you're usually eating. It's used for weight loss and also for improved metabolic health. There's a fairly large body of evidence, all animal studies, that do show some interesting beneficial effects on a variety of disorders. Not a lot of human studies, though, so a lot of the claims out there are based on animal research. When we get into long-term human studies, it's very few, so not a lot of long-term studies looking at actual humans. Maybe slight benefit for weight loss, maybe a slight benefit for lipids. So the recommendation is patients with obesity and no other health conditions may consider using this as a tool to help them with weight loss, as they're making other lifestyle changes as well. But for patients with health conditions or with medications, which are our patients, that's not something that we would recommend. It's going to interact with, potentially with their medications. It's going to cause symptoms of hypoglycemia or lightheadedness, fatigue. Our patients don't need more of these symptoms. So again, if you're doing the cutting down on the time of day that you're eating, that's not a significant issue. If someone is snacking a lot at night and most of their calories are coming in the evening, cutting that off and reducing the amount of time that they're eating throughout the day, that may actually help them lose weight. But the other types of fasts or going full days with really limited intake is just not a great idea for our CHD patients. And if they have any sort of history of an eating disorder, pretty much any of these, that would be a no-go. But this one, it's really easy to restrict your time down and really trigger any sort of disordered eating. So be on the lookout for signs of that. Okay, so we know all these ideas of things we shouldn't do. What actually should we be telling our patients? There are lots of diets out there that we know are healthy. Mediterranean diet, DASH diet, there are lots of ideas. There's not necessarily one that's better than the other. This is from the most recent dietary guidelines that the US puts out. The orange lines show the percentage of people not meeting goal. The blue lines show the percentage of people who are meeting goal. So 90% of Americans aren't eating enough vegetables, 75% aren't eating enough fruit, 75% are eating too much added sugar, saturated fat, and sodium. So any diet changes that we make that are sustainable and inching towards improving these things is going to be beneficial. We're doing a pretty abysmal job with healthy nutrition in America, which I don't think is a surprise, but some of these numbers are pretty staggering. And then when we look at our kids with congenital heart disease, this study was based in Europe, but we can assume that American kids aren't eating drastically better than European kids. Less than half are eating fruits and vegetables every day. More are drinking whole milk rather than low-fat milk. They're drinking sugar-sweetened beverages and high-fat meals a lot of the time. So we really need to be talking about healthy nutrition with our kids with CHD so that they're starting to establish some healthy nutrition habits as they're getting older. So what do I mean by a heart-healthy diet? It is not secret, and it is not rocket science. It is pretty basic common sense stuff. More fruits and vegetables, replacing saturated or solid fats with healthier unsaturated fats, choosing whole grains instead of refined grains, cutting out highly processed foods and sugar-sweetened beverages, eating fish and plant proteins more often than animal proteins. Pretty common things. They don't have to do all of them. They could pick one thing to work on. I always tell my patients, pick the thing that you aren't even going to notice. Start with the low-hanging fruit. Think of something that 5 years from now you can still see yourself doing. That's the change I want you to work on. I don't want you to start some really difficult to follow restrictive plan that we don't need. And this is a tool that we've developed in our clinic that's based on the USDA's MyPlate, but we've made it a lot more specific for cardiovascular health. And this is such a useful tool for patients. They can, once they learn this, it tells them the types of foods in each category that they should be choosing and the portions. And those are both really important things. They can set up their meals at home according to this. They can go out to eat and think of this as they're ordering. It's just really beneficial. A lot of people will say, oh, I'm doing okay. I have a salad every night for dinner. But this is at every meal. This is throughout the day. So they really have to work fruits and vegetables in earlier in the day in order to meet these goals. The PDF is online. It's available on our website. And it does have a back page that has some nutrition tips as well. Omega-3 fats, I don't know how I'm doing on time, so I'll pick up the pace a little bit. EPA and DHA do have some anti-arrhythmic properties, and we do encourage eating more fish and seafood rather than taking fish oil supplements because you get a lot of other benefits from eating more fish. Primarily, it means you're eating usually less of animal proteins like red meats that are less healthy for your heart. So we do see with people with higher seafood intake compared to people with no seafood intake, decreased risks of arrhythmias and decreased sudden cardiac death. So 2 4-ounce servings a week is the recommendation. It's not that much. It's easy to do. Canned fish like tuna gets you there as well. And you don't see a significant improvement beyond that. It's perfectly safe to eat more fish than that, but really just 2 servings a week is what we see a lot of benefit with. Patients with heart failure, the most important thing they can do, the biggest recommendation I tell anyone really is to cook at home more often. 75% of the sodium in our diet comes from processed foods and restaurant meals. It's not from the salt shaker usually. So if they're cooking more foods at home, we're gonna get a significant reduction in sodium. And I know if they have heart failure, that's a challenge. Standing up to cook is a real challenge for some of our patients. They may not have people to help them cook. So it's not always as easy as just telling them to cook more often. So we think it's really important, and this is where working with a dietitian can be beneficial because we have the time and resources to help them come up with a plan. There are some convenience foods and processed foods that are actually really great choices. There are some frozen meals that the whole line are low in sodium. These are balanced portion control meals. They're all 500 milligrams of sodium or less. They're great choices. Some of these meal delivery services and kits that are so popular now actually can be a really great resource for patients. There are some that are perfectly low in sodium for them. And then there are plenty of no salt added canned fruits and vegetables, canned fish like tuna, frozen fruits and vegetables, pre-prepped fruits and vegetables. So all of these things cost money, and that can be an issue as well, but there are some really good options for patients. There are some apps that help with sodium tracking. Chronometer is a food log app, but it does a good job tracking sodium. From the Kidney Foundation, there's a fluid tracker, so if someone's on a fluid restriction, it helps them track their weights and their fluid intake. And then there's a heart failure app from the Heart Association that can help track medications and symptoms. So some useful things. And then we talk about weight management with our patients, because we really do see rates of overweight and obesity on par with the general American public, which, as we know, is not good. We do see lower rates of morbid obesity with congenital heart patients, though. Their activity oftentimes is limited. I talk to a lot of patients who feel like, well, I can't exercise, I'm not going to be able to lose weight. Exercise is not that useful for weight loss. It really is important for maintenance of weight and prevention of weight regain. But I always encourage them to not let that be a deal breaker for them. A lot of times they feel like it's useless. So I want them to be as active as they can, and I think getting them more active is always a really important goal, but having awareness of their calorie intake and what they're eating is going to help with weight loss. Setting realistic goals. A lot of times people want to lose 50 or 60 pounds. They're going to see benefits in their symptoms if they lose 5% of their weight, and I think that's not always what they want to hear, but it's a really important thing for them to hear. And we need to say it, because we don't always give them realistic goals for weight loss. They need to hear if they lose 10 pounds, they're going to have better blood pressure, and they're going to have better control of AFib and all these other issues. And I think setting realistic goals and having them maintain that slight weight loss is going to be a lot better in the long run. So weight loss strategies, again, I don't know anything secret, but being consistent and picking things that they can stick with is really important. Planning. If they don't do anything other than they start thinking about their food in advance, they're meal planning for the week, they're thinking about what they're going to eat before they're to the point of starving. Tracking what they're eating with an app like MyFitnessPal can be super helpful, because people don't have much awareness of their calorie intake or what their calorie goals are. I don't think we need to always track everything. Some people find that valuable, but just doing it even for a week to learn where their calories are coming from can be really eye-opening for our patients. Not drinking their calories, choosing higher, bulkier foods, so decreasing their calorie density. Fewer calories on your plate with more fruits and vegetables is going to fill them up. Slowing down, being more mindful during meals, cooking at home, and not using screens while you're eating. You want to be in control. All right, so overall, we really want to focus on making sustainable changes. It may not be a massive overhaul, but small sustainable changes that they can live with, rather than a short-term restrictive fad diet. Talking about sustained weight loss rather than weight cycling. When they lose large amounts of weight, they lose fat and muscle mass. They regain it as fat mass. It's not a good outcome in the long run. And using the Heart Healthy Plate as a guide as their meal planning. All right, thank you very much.
So Tracy has to leave, so if we have 1 or 2 questions for her now would be the time. Yeah, do you want to?
One question with respect to that 5 to 10% weight loss, is that over 1 year, 6 months? Like over what period of time should you tell them is it realistic?
6 months is ideal, but over a year, I mean, I think gradually decreasing is the key versus we don't want it in a month. So 6 months to a year, I'm really, really thrilled with if we can get that. And then maintaining it is often much, much harder than losing it for a lot of patients, and that's, yeah.
Do you see a benefit of bringing in family members, spouse, or partner, discussing dietary changes?
Absolutely. I think whoever is eating at home or whoever's in charge of the food planning and the food purchasing is really important to be in the room with me if we can. We teach cooking classes as well. I always encourage spouses or partners to come because if it's just one person, they feel like they're on a special diet and eating separately from their families, or they hear the information and the person who's doing the cooking doesn't, and it just doesn't translate to actual change.
One more.
Okay, yeah.
I always ask people to have a container of raw vegetables, take it out, add
Yeah.
Do you have any other tricks to getting them to eat more vegetables?
Come to our cooking classes so they learn how to make new things and trying new things. I mean, I think people are, if they have kids, they don't want to buy vegetables because they don't want to throw them away because they assume their kids won't eat them. But I think just having them present and available and trying them in different preparations. If they think they don't like cauliflower, try it a different way. But I think just continuing to work them in. But yeah, bringing them as snacks, having them throughout the day more frequently is just the goal.
I also tell parents of young adults not to tell them to eat it, just to set it down beside them.
Yeah, and seeing your,
Want to do exactly what we
exactly, if they see their parents eating them, that's really important. And so if they never see their parents touch a vegetable, it's not that great of an incentive. All right, thank you.
That was great.